Right, well, it's 10:42, so should we go ahead and get started? I wanted to start off just by introducing myself and telling you a little bit about my background and how I ended up here and involved in the shared services movement. My background's all business prior to getting involved in the childcare industry, which was just about 5 years ago. So I worked on Wall Street for a while. I worked as a strategy consultant for one of the large management consulting firms for several years. And then starting in about 2002, I started a business with my husband, which we ran for about 15 years based in Central Florida. And then we sold it in 2017. And after we sold the business, I was, trying to decide what to do with the rest of my life. And I've always been passionate about education and decided based upon all my research and seeing, what was going on in the field and all the research around brain development in the first 5 years that I wanted to do something in the field of early childhood education. So with my networking around Central Florida, I found that our Early Learning Coalition, which is the CCR&R in Central Florida, was hiring someone to run a business institute for early learning entrepreneurs. So what they were doing was launching a business training program that was 40 hours of education for the childcare provider community in Central Florida. And basically, a day on finance, a day on marketing, a day on human resource management, but definitely geared towards the childcare industry. So specific things related to managing a childcare business specifically. And I did that for a year, got to know the community very well, absolutely loved working directly with the providers. But it was part of my job to explore the concept of shared services. So really, there wasn't really a notion as to how Central Florida might get involved in shared services. Our Early Learning Coalition there had the license holder for the ECE Shared Resources platform. So they were taking like the first step in terms of making that platform available to the providers in the community, but there wasn't a whole lot of uptake. So, people were getting accounts, but you could tell just as I was looking at reports, there wasn't a whole lot of usage. So I came to this same conference back in 2016. I also went to a more hands-on workshop that the Opportunities Exchange Group hosted out in Colorado Springs, and just loved the concept. Having a business background and then working directly with the providers, I just saw what the need was for kind of professional business management services in the early childhood education community, and really understanding that the small providers just didn't have a prayer of making money because the economics just didn't work. So I left the coalition, but stayed very involved. I stayed as a mentor to programs that were going through the Business Institute. And then also got the call from Louise and Amy asking if I would get involved with the Opportunities Exchange. So I worked on a couple of launch projects for shared services alliances in the state of New York and in Washington, D.C., and then decided I was going to start the process of kind of taking the baby steps towards launching a shared services alliance in Central Florida. So what I did starting about this time last year was start to write a business plan for a shared services alliance. And what I'm going to share today is a very much of a skeleton view of what a business plan looks like. The whole written document in a more kind of genericized form is available on the Opportunities Exchange website. So if you go to the Shared Services Startup Toolkit, you will find a link to a Word document, which is basically what I wrote with a lot of assistance from my colleagues at Opportunities Exchange, and having worked closely with those launch projects. So today I'm going to share, the basics of developing a plan. And feel free to stop me, ask questions. I'm not sure what stage all of you are in. I know some of you are well beyond even where I am in Central Florida. So this all may be remedial for you, but if you have questions, just let me know. So the first question is, why do you need a business plan? So I was in this room yesterday with Heidi McGowan, who I don't know if it's, I think some of you were also here as well. And she talked about the whole process of having a very kind of inclusive process, working with providers and stakeholders in the community to create a model for a shared service and a development plan for a shared services program in a given community. But I thought it was interesting that at the very end of her presentation, she's like, well, the next step is to write a business plan. I was like, oh, what a great segue into what I'm going to talk about today. So why do you need the plan? Well, one of the reasons you need the plan is just to sort of make it clear to yourself and the group that's going to be running the Shared Services Alliance, what exactly are you going to do? What are all the activities that you are going to be performing in collaboration with the providers on behalf of the providers, and make it very clear, because there's a lot of different flavors of shared services alliances that we've learned about in these 2 days, whether you are just facilitating providers doing a lot of business activities themselves and providing them with coaching, or you actually going to do it for them and just take over a lot of the back office business operations. So it's kind of creating that roadmap and getting very specific about exactly what you're going to do. But then it's also having a device for communicating to any of the stakeholders that you're going to be involved with, what your shared services alliance is, explaining the concept of a shared services alliance, and then laying out not only the roadmap, but also the financial implications of what you're doing, because who is your audience for this business plan? It's going to be your funders. I don't know of any alliance that doesn't operate without a number of community partners, government agencies, and then, being able to communicate to your internal team, this is what we're all about and this is what we're doing. So I am in the process now of launching a shared services alliance in Central Florida that, as you can tell, is named the Early Learning Shared Services Alliance. Acronym is ELSA, since that's a big mouthful. But this plan was created, with the audience of, the first people that I circulated it to were kind of friends and family, just to get feedback on, does this make any sense at all? What do you think? Then I went in a just sort of more vetting feedback kind of mode to potential funders. I worked closely with our Early Learning Coalition because I was still very well connected with them, and I knew that they would have access to various funding streams that might be able to help get this off the ground. And it was very much in alliance with what they were trying to accomplish in trying to raise up the sustainability of the programs in the region. At the time that I was writing it, I didn't aspire to be working with government agencies, but with all the ARPA funding and the different funding streams that have come through, various crisis funding programs over the last 2 years, it turns out that I did present it to the Office of Early Learning in Florida, and they have gotten very excited about funding the pilot that I'm launching in Central Florida. So that turned out to be another stakeholder and audience for this plan that I really wasn't anticipating, and my aspirations weren't that lofty, but I got the attention of the state, which is fantastic. And then as I've started onboarding internal team members, it's just been a great device for communicating very specifically what this is all about. So where do you start? You start by setting the stage and defining the need, making a statement of need, which really defines the problem. And I think Sharon and other members of the Opportunities Exchange team would also describe this as the theory of change. But really sort of making it clear, especially if you're going to have audience members for your plan who are not really familiar with the childcare industry specifically. So in some ways, in my, at the beginning of my business plan, I was thinking about the business community, the Chamber of Commerce, sort of really, making the claim that, the future of our economy is based upon having a skilled, educated workforce. And that starts with high quality early childhood education. And if we don't invest in early childhood education and have more of these childcare businesses succeed, where are we going to be in 20 years from now? So I started, at a very kind of macro level to explain the need, and then to also then explain the fact, kind of what was the current state of our industry in Central Florida, and made it very clear that, we're bumping up against a number of challenges. In Florida specifically, it was that while it's traditionally been a very low wage state, especially in Central Florida, where the hospitality and the theme park industry is a huge employer and they pay, very low wages. Legislation was passed last year to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour over the next 5 years. So that's a big change that is going to have a dramatic impact on the childcare industry. So that's one big headwind that we've got facing us. The second is then COVID. And so many programs either having to close their doors or be shut for a while, or just, still struggling 2 years later with lower enrollment than they had before the pandemic. And then coupled with that, the staffing crisis. So sort of that's kind of the stage that I set in putting this document together to explain why all these small childcare businesses are up against a business challenge that is even greater than it ever has been historically. So that's step one, the statement of need. The next step is laying out your vision. So I think most people who have seen kind of a template for a business plan know that you start with your mission, your vision, and your values. So, but what exactly does that mean? Those are very kind of generic terms. So a mission statement is really a high-level statement of your reason for existence. And I've written a short one just so you have an example of what this is, and I'm going to read it to you. I didn't feel like it was a good idea to put it on the slides, but the mission statement for ELSA is childcare programs cannot provide high-quality education if they're struggling to survive financially. ELSA provides a solution to the business challenges faced by small childcare providers. As a shared services alliance of small centers and home-based childcare providers, ELSA will enable centers and home-based childcare providers to share the costs of a centralized staff for administrative support so that providers can focus on quality programming and education. So it's very simple. It's not, it's not pages and pages. It just gets right to the point of what is it we're talking about that we're trying to accomplish here. The next step is your vision. And your vision is really just sort of laying out what you see that future state to be. So if you had a shared services alliance that was working beautifully and you had many, many providers that were participating in this alliance, what would that future state look like? This graphic is a little, I'm going to move on to the next slide. Oh, sorry. There we go. So I've created this virtuous cycle of childcare market success. And basically what I'm trying to describe here is that with the support of ELSA, small childcare providers will more successfully run efficient operations that achieve greater revenue and will have the resources to hire and retain talented teachers, devote more funds to curriculum, staff training and development, and improve the overall quality of care and education. And so then this circle then shows, by having those business supports, you increase your enrollment. Back to the iron triangle, that's one of the most important pillars of the iron triangle. maximize your revenue per student, minimize your administrative expenses, which then allows you to hire and retain quality teachers, invest in curriculum and professional development, which leads to improved student outcomes, and the circle continues. So that's what we're all here for. It's a long road to get there, but being from a business background, I really believe that having that strong business foundation for these businesses will help them get to this point. And just a little, we've seen some of the models of what shared services is, and it's a combination of both pedagogical leadership and business leadership, leading to these, better outcomes for children and more sustainable businesses. In our community, the Early Learning Coalition really does take care of that pedagogical leadership piece of it. So they've got coaches that are going into the programs. They've got all kinds of training program. They pivoted quickly to virtual training during the pandemic. So Elsa, this program is not about pedagogical leadership. We're just trying to give the teachers and the directors more time to focus on quality in the classroom by taking all those administrative tasks off their plate. And because very few of them got into the industry because they really wanted to run a business and spend their days doing the things that business people do. They want to focus on and preparing the next generation of young children. So in a standard business plan, after kind of setting the stage with your mission, your vision, your values, you then have a one-page executive summary. And often what you want to do is write the whole business plan and then come back and summarize the whole thing in a one page, because there's a lot of people that you're going to circulate this business plan to. This is the only page they're going to read. So you just have to assume that you may only get, 5 minutes of somebody's attention, and you've got to boil it down into an executive summary. And in the version of the document that I created, that's on the website, you'll see a one-page executive summary. As with everything that's part of the Opportunities Exchange, set of materials, you can steal, take, whatever, copy, paste, and it's yours for the taking. But I thought it was interesting because, even when I met with the CEO and the Chief Program Officer of our Early Learning Coalition to share my business plan with them, they had not read my business plan, I could tell. So that's why it's good to, have the executive summary and be able to kind of really rattle off those key points of what it is you're trying to accomplish to get their attention and get them engaged in conversation, assuming that they have not read your document. The next step, specifically in a business plan that is for a shared services alliance, is to explain what the shared services model is, because a lot of your audience are really, they're like, shared services, what does that mean? So you want to sort of lay out the building blocks of what is it that you're trying to accomplish. And, from my personal, my passion and the reason I'm doing this is I'm interested in increasing the quality of childcare. And how does a shared services program do that? It does it by reducing administrative duties that enable directors to spend more time with children and teachers, as well as implement quality improvement coaching that increases early learning outcomes for children. With the funders that I'm talking to, that's really what they care about. They don't really care about, do they have a budget? Are they using child care management software? The kind of the details of how you get there are not that important to them. So I want to make sure that in explaining the shared services model and what we're trying to accomplish, that outcomes for children are front and center. The second piece is expanding enrollment and revenues. Marketing resources enable targeted efforts to increase enrollment, and centralized administrative staff manage the process to maximize subsidies provided by federal, state, and local governments to low-income families. So we want to make sure, the approach that we're taking is not only using some marketing dollars to get, make sure that you're out there, people know where to find you, the different programs, but that also each of these programs knows all the different funding streams and is making sure that they're getting fully compensated for every child that's in their program. The third pillar is to increase the stability of childcare. So through centralized fee collection, higher rates of collection, using software to streamline administrative processes, improving financial record keeping and reporting to provide visibility into financial performance. And then by improving financial stability to increase wages and benefits, improve staff retention, improve staff recruiting and retention. I know one of the reasons that I was really motivated to do this work was as I was running the Business Institute for our Early Learning Coalition and sitting down with providers. We had a whole model that they could use that was in Excel for putting all their numbers into. A lot of them, Excel was just not going to happen. A lot of them, if you ask them if they had a budget, if they've tracked their financial performance, the only way they knew how they were doing was whether there was cash in their bank account. That was the story, so. And then also, some of them were at great legal risk, so I would go in and talk to them, and I would sit with them and put everything into a budget just by like, okay, let's pull out your bank statements and let's kind of figure out how to code these charges that are on your bank statement. And then let's put in your payroll. You're not paying minimum wage. That's the problem. So we got to work on that, not using a payroll system, just paying people through Venmo. So just, there's a lot of challenges in this industry, and I just wanted to help more people be in compliance and get to where they wanted to go, because they all got into the business because they had, amazing aspirations for what they wanted to do for children, and they had amazing aspirations for what they wanted to do for themselves in terms of creating something that they would have value at the end of their careers. And then finally, the fourth pillar of a shared services model is expanding the capacity of childcare. So by more childcare providers being supported by a backbone organization and having that professional administrative support, it makes it easier to start up small programs and to sustain them. I really want to be working with organizations in Central Florida that are trying to fill in those childcare deserts. And how do we fill in those childcare deserts? We just bring a model where somebody who can get trained up or already is maybe a family home, but is ready to expand into a center, but they really don't have those skills. Like, we'll take over all the back office. You just take care of managing your classrooms, finding the teachers, and providing quality. The next step in writing a business plan is getting laying out what those services that you're going to offer. And these have been grouped into different buckets. So the first one is more around financial management. And this is kind of a laundry list of all the things that you could provide. In my experience, most shared services alliances are not this comprehensive and don't provide all of this, but this is all of the things that you could be doing as a centralized back office. So that includes bookkeeping. It includes a childcare management software system. It includes business coaching, marketing enrollment management, payroll processing, and tax preparation. So that's all the financial management piece of it. Maybe you just want to support childcare management software. Maybe and some business coaching. What I've seen is that's kind of the pillar of where a lot of shared services alliances start. Then on the respect to the administration of government programs, you could take over the food program administration for your members or the subsidy administration. I mean, I would love it if in Florida and in the work that I'm doing in Central Florida, if we could get childcare management software to talk directly to our government subsidy system. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I'm going to keep working at it until we make some progress there. On the HR side of things, the things that you could do as a shared services alliance our managed benefits, whether it's, finding some access to health insurance or 401k, or even just one of the things that we've done, at least in the short term in Central Florida, is partnered with a ACA, Affordable Care Act navigator, who comes in and sits with each of the staff members in each of the programs and make sure that they do get signed up for ACA insurance. And then the providers provide some dollars each month to go towards whatever premium or out-of-pocket expenses that they do have. An alliance can help with staff recruitment. In Central Florida, what we've done is partnered with a recruiting agency that does recruiting for all of the ELSA schools. So they do all the posting on Indeed and do all the first round interviews, vet all the resumes, do all the first round interviews, and then provide to the programs qualified candidates for their in-person on-campus interviews. And then once the hiring decisions are made, the recruiter will also do the background checks as well as reference checks. So really trying to, a lot of that recruiting effort is very, very time consuming. Getting all the job, that we're also, the recruiting firm is also has all the job descriptions all ready to go. So you just tell her, we need an assistant teacher, we need a lead teacher, or what, we need a cook, whatever it might be. And then eventually we would like to get to a substitute pool in Central Florida. That's a huge, when we have done surveying around what do you need the most, substitute pool comes out very high on the list. And then we have people on staff who can provide some HR and legal support. So we've got, the first person I hired is somebody who is a SHRM CP. So she can provide, just answer questions, make sure that people are staying in compliance, provide referrals to, if official legal support is needed, provide referrals to community legal aid agencies that will help with that kind of thing. And then some kind of extra things that you can provide as a shared services alliance are accreditation coaching, grant writing, and then providing community of practice meetings. So getting the group together on a regular basis to share their experiences. There's so much to be gained from people learning from each other and just feeling like they've got a community that supports each other. So in laying out the different services that you're going to offer, I would suggest that you get very specific. And I think when I've circulated my business plan, one of the pieces of feedback that I got was like, wow, you've really thought this all through. You know exactly how you're going to do this. So this is just an example of, how specific I've gotten in the business plan that I've created, specifically around the childcare management software piece. So made it very clear that we've already chosen ProCare Online as the software. It's the industry standard, that there's a business coach who will provide it, be a technical expert and work with programs to utilize all aspects of the software to maximize efficient management of their businesses. And then, be specific about which modules and which pieces of it that I'm talking about. So it's online enrollment tracking. It's a CRM for managing parent inquiries, child check-in and check-out, staff check-in and check-out, automated billing and collection, attendance reporting, child record keeping, the parent engagement app, food program record keeping, and lesson planning. So just making it clear exactly what are all the benefits of having childcare management software and what is it going to do for these providers. The next step is laying out your organizational structure. So making it clear that you've thought through who are all the people that will be involved in helping you manage your alliance. So being clear on what the parent organization is going to be in different communities, and as we've seen by all the different participants that are here at this conference, sometimes it's a CCR&R that hosts and houses the Shared Services Alliance. Sometimes, it could be a program that's part of a United Way. Gina, I think your program is housed within a community foundation. Is that right? So that's another possibility. So being clear about what that parent organization is going to be. Also laying out who your advisory board is going to be. So, you want to make sure that you've got the right kinds of stakeholders on your advisory board, representation from the provider community, representation from your funding community, representation from your kind of child care infrastructure locally. What community partnerships are you going to be relying upon and engaging in order to make sure that, you don't have to do all the heavy lifting yourself. If there's a mental health organization that can provide some mental health services, either for your providers or coming into the classroom, what is that organization? If there's, I know in our community, the Black Business Investment Fund is very interested in supporting the childcare industry, and they've gotten some funding recently from Wells Fargo. So we want to lean heavily on that organization to provide them access and to work in concert with the work that we're doing to make sure that if they're providing lending or grants to these small childcare providers, that those dollars are being well utilized, that they're able to report back on what the outcomes have been as a result of getting those dollars. So really reaching out and taking advantage of what community partnerships you can rely upon to get the work done. Laying out who your leadership team is going to be, and then what your staffing is going to be. I know what I'm planning in Central Florida is, in the short term, it's just me as leadership and a childcare business coach, and we're outsourcing all of the services because we're just starting with 10 providers. So we don't need full-time bookkeeping staff for 10 providers. So we're outsourcing bookkeeping, we're outsourcing the recruiting, we're outsourcing the digital marketing. But once we get a critical mass and kind of, work out the bugs with a lot of experimentation in our first year, then, what I've laid out is a 5-year plan of bringing in-house that staff in years 2 and 3 to do those things and have them just focus on the providers that are in our alliance, but laying out what that staffing plan is going to look like. Marketing. So I'm talking here now about marketing for the Shared Services Alliance. The first thing you need to do is make clear who your target market is. Are you going to be focusing on centers? Are you going to be focused on family child cares? If you choose one or the other, the services that you provide and what your alliance will look like, even the software you pick could be very different. If it's going to be both, be specific about what are you going to do that might be different for those different populations. And then also, whatever else about your target market, you just want to get specific about it. I know in thinking through who needs these services and where do we want to focus our effort in Central Florida, it is both small centers and family child care. One of the reasons why is because as we talk to more family child care, some are very happy to, have their 6 children, and that's good, and that's working for them. But a number of them have expansion plans. They want to move to a large family home. They would like to move into a center, but they really need a lot of business coaching to get from where they are now to where they'd like to be. But the target market that we've defined in Central Florida is programs that are less than 100 children. The ones that are over 100 children, they've got the infrastructure. They can support having their own finance team in-house. It's those ones that are less than 100 children that really, they're doing everything and they're just overwhelmed and they just can't make the numbers work. So that's who we're targeting. And in Central Florida, we're also targeting only providers that provide subsidized care. It's very important from the mission of what we're trying to accomplish that we are helping those children that come from low-income families, and the individually owned and operated childcare providers. As part of your marketing effort, you also want to rely on those community partnerships as well, whether it's working, we're working through our Early Learning Coalition, but there's also in trying to access the family childcare network, it may be a church leader that you're reaching out to. It may be, I think in one of the conversations earlier in this conference, somebody managed that they found, I think it was maybe Gary this morning, when, he needed to be vetted by the person who was kind of the leader in the Caribbean community before other family childcare providers were going to kind of trust him, get on board with him. So that's been one of the nice things about being involved with the Business Institute, which has now been in place for 5 years, and that we've got 5 years worth of providers who understand the reason for these business supports. They've learned a lot about what they should be doing, but they're kind of ripe for being part of our alliance because they still don't have the time to do it. I mean, they know they should have a budget, but can they still do it? No, they can't. So relying on those community partnerships as part of your outreach plan, and then putting a whole provider recruitment plan in place, having some information sessions, making sure that you've got some advocates that can be on those information sessions, so to build that trust, and then setting up a very clear application process. We did it, all electronically. After, information session, we just sent people to a link that had basically a Google form for them to fill out. But we did, you want to make sure that you've got some very specific criteria about who makes sense to be in the alliance, and who does not. A lot of times you're going to find that you are going to be oversubscribed. So you have to figure out how you're going to whittle down that list to who you're going to start with. So the next thing you want to think about then is a fee structure. And these are all, every alliance takes a different approach to this. Some of them, have a lot of grant funding, and at least in a pilot stage, they're not going to charge for the service because the most important thing is that they get adoption and they get kind of proof of the model. But I believe that it makes sense to, have a plan in place to charge a fee for your service. I do think that providers do have to have some skin in the game. They have to understand that what you're providing for them, there's value to it. But, there's a lot of decisions to be made in trying to figure out who pays for what. So you could have a sliding scale depending on how big the programs are, have one fee for family childcare versus another fee for center-based programs, deciding who pays for the software license, and some of the things that you might be providing wouldn't necessarily be free, but the alliance would have negotiated discounts. We've negotiated with our alliance a discounted access to ProCare software, discounted access to tax preparation services. But the business coaching piece of it, we are supporting in our first year a lot because, we're very clear about the fact that we're doing a lot of experimentation and really seeing what works and what doesn't. We're not charging other than having people pay for their own software. But, once I get data and can show what the, kind of economic impact is on being part of the alliance, I want to demonstrate to people that, it's very, easy to see how this membership can pay for itself. So by having access to the marketing enrollment services, if you fill your program, even if you add 5 more children to your program, you can easily pay for a $500 a month fee to have access to the alliance when so many other things are being taken off your plate and you're getting access to that business coaching. But part of what you need to figure out in order to figure out, well, what is a fee structure that would be appropriate and how do I model like what this is all going to look like is to provide prepare a financial model. And what I did was a sort of zero-based budget, starting from the number of providers that would be participating per year, hiring that childcare business coach, including the salary and benefits, understanding what the childcare management software would look like, whether there are startup fees associated with onboarding a childcare management software and what the annual fees would be. And then every service that you're going to offer, costing out what that's going to look like. So in my financial model, because I'm outsourcing a lot of things in that first year, it's it's estimating how many hours a week are we going to have to be spending on bookkeeping? What is that hourly rate going to be? And just building up the model from that. And then when do we get to, the point where that hourly fee and the number of hours that we're paying for justifies bringing somebody on full time and building that into the model. But in addition to then sort of either your costs on an hourly basis for outsourcing the services or your staff costs as you bring those services on, you need to add in, your own marketing costs for marketing your program, whether it's building a website, some collateral materials, and then admin and overhead costs. It's kind of interesting when I started thinking about this and, was collaborating with my colleagues at Opportunities Exchange around it. And they were like, well, I'm not sure you want to start your own 501c3. You have to have office space. You have to, there's so many costs associated with, having your own organization. I was like, middle of the pandemic, like, I don't think I need an office. I think we can do this virtually. As long as I've got some community partners that'll let us use a conference room every once in a while and host some events, I think the world would just as soon. And most of the work that, the way I like to operate is face-to-face with the providers, going and meeting with them. And when is the time that they can meet with me? Well, it's actually at 6:30 in the evening. So what's the point of having an office? The easiest place to meet them is on the ground, where you can get on the computer, their computer with them, show them, whatever challenge they're having with the software, rather than trying to do it over a Zoom call. So our model is, we work virtually from home, and then we go meet the providers. And, if we need to have a meeting, which we really haven't had yet, since we're still just starting now to get back to in-person meetings, we can do that with some of our community partners. And just to show, kind of what this financial model looks like, there's a page of assumptions that goes behind this, but it kind of starts, a 6-year plan, how many providers of what type are going to be in the program each year. This shows adding in provider fees. After year 1, we do charge a fee. Then, building up the costs. In this case, it's for the childcare business coach, bookkeeping services, a childcare management software, recruiting fees, marketing services for the providers. We add in a substitute pool in year 3, and then just kind of administrative expenses, whatever they might be. I think I just used a percentage to throw that on there, but it also then made it clear for funders how much I needed to raise in order to get me through to a point where this model, in theory, is going to break even in year 6. So I would like this program that I'm building in Central Florida be self-sustaining. I know that's a lofty goal. I haven't heard of another shared services alliance that's been able to accomplish that, but that's what I'm going to work for. I'll keep you posted. And then the next thing is to put together a timeline. So this is just an example. It's not anything. This isn't exactly the way we operated, but step 1 was to hire a childcare business coach. Design all of our own marketing materials in order to be able to do provider recruitment. Then recruit the pilot participants, onboard providers, establish core services. So kind of lay out very specifically what you're going to do when, and have a timeline. That's part of your business plan towards the end. And then finally, presentation formats. So I would suggest that you have two different versions of your business plan. One is a detailed business plan that's kind of a text-based document with some graphs and charts and illustrations, but no more than 15 pages. People just really don't want to read anything longer than that. And then have another version, which is a PowerPoint presentation, which is kind of no more than 15 slides. Because depending on your audience and who you're sharing this with, as I mentioned, even with the Early Learning Coalition and the CEO and Chief Program Officer there, they hadn't read anything before we got into the Zoom meeting. So I just had to tell the whole story with a PowerPoint presentation. So you just need to be ready, depending on your audience, to kind of share in a format that they can digest and absorb and get to the meat, which is, what do they need to know to make a decision to support you or not. So I just talked the whole time. Happy to answer any questions. But yeah, Gina.
On your breakout of expenses for the provider fees, how many programs are you figuring?
It's up at the top. So in year one, there's 10.
Oh, I see.
So the original plan was 7 centers and 3 homes, and then kind of adding that same amount every year. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
I may have missed this, but you use ProCare for the providers.
Yes.
What data system do you use to keep up with all of the providers and everything that you gather on them?
Okay, so what we're just experimenting with right now is Trello. It's a kind of project management tool. But basically with that, we can keep track of, we're using it, for onboarding. We're still in kind of the onboarding stage with a number of these. So what are all those steps in that onboarding process and where is everybody? But then you can kind of do some reports out of that on kind of where people are in that process. And then I'm in the process of trying to figure out what a dashboard is going to look like for all the metrics that we want to be tracking. So we want to be tracking enrollment, we want to be tracking staff turnover, we want to be tracking wages, because one of the things that we're doing in our business coaching is really trying to show people where they've got room to increase wages. It's very important to me and the mission of what we're trying to accomplish to make this profession an attractive profession. So what I'm really finding is that there's such resistance to increasing wages. Even if you go in and you sit with a program and you say, you're dropping $30,000 to the bottom line, you have some room. I mean, that includes paying yourself. You've got some room to increase some wages, and so, but one of the challenges that I'm having is that a lot of the stimulus money that's coming through is short term. So, so people are like, I don't know if I should be using that to pay my people more, because what happens when it runs out? So then we talk about, well, let's think about adding a classroom then, using that as a one-time infusion to do some construction and add a classroom. Once you have that extra classroom, let's see how those numbers, those fees drop to the bottom line, and that'll allow you to increase wages. So just working through all those dynamics of, but then as to answer your question, so we are tracking profitability and then some of the iron triangle metrics, and how much outstanding, unpaid tuition is out there, are you getting full fee collection, that kind of thing. Other questions? Yes.
I was wondering average size of the centers that you've used in your budget.
Yeah, it's about 35.
Yeah, their capacity of 35.
What their current enrollment is. I mean, a lot of them are still sub, capacity. They might have a capacity of about 50, but they're at around 35 right now.
And then the other piece that I'm curious about, I'm from New Hampshire, is the strategy. The centers that need it the most. the ones that are not going to engage. And if shared services, if this alliance were to support not just the centers that, I mean, obviously in the beginning that are ready, but as you get into years 4, 5, 6, it seemed, in my mind, I really would want to strategize how to engage those centers that have the least amount of bandwidth to
Right.
utilize the shared service.
Right, right. So my current thinking is that, first of all, a number of the programs who are in the pilot are very influential in the community. So I've intentionally picked some that are, have a voice and can, try to encourage other people that this is a good thing. Also, by working very collaboratively with the Early Learning Coalition and those coaches that are going into the programs on a regular basis, the pedagogical coaches, having them know, what services we offer, just, sort of getting a number of people saying, you need to call these ELSA folks, just so building kind of a groundswell of enthusiasm around, they're good people, you got to trust them, they're going to help you, and you're going to be happy. So that's really, it's more of a kind of relationship building, personal engagement strategy, I would say. And at the end of the day, I am a business person, and if you don't want my help, more power to you. Good luck. What's that?
You wouldn't include that
Include
a strategy. written-
boring, just other than, having some, we'll be going to provider meetings that the Early Learning Coalition hosts and being, given opportunities to speak. So yeah, doing a lot of kind of outreach and engagement, but I'm not going to twist anybody's arm to be part of this. I just, there's plenty of people who do want, I think, the support that it's not, I don't need to do that. Yeah. At some point, some funders may have a different idea. And at that point, right now, this is kind of, I'm running the show and, if a funder comes in and says, in order to get these dollars, I want you to engage 50 providers who maybe don't fit your current strategy, then we'll have to talk about ways to engage those people. And, at that point, you need to create some incentives, right? To make it very clear to, create something that they want or need, that the only way they're going to get it is to be participating in the program. But that wouldn't be based upon me deciding that that's the approach that I would want to take. That would be somebody else calling the shots and deciding. But I've just seen enough programs. Unfortunately, in our community, and you may have this too in your community, there's been a lot of stuff that has been thrown at these providers, and it all just, nothing happens. And I just don't want to be another one of those programs or initiatives, or, they buy laptops and send them out to the providers, and they sit in the boxes and nobody ever opens them. They buy curriculum and they send them out to the providers and they sit in the boxes and nobody ever opens them. I have no interest in being another one of those things that just gets ignored. Yes.
On the family childcare homes, I'm curious about because what I see up here, it works out to about $3,000 a year.
Uh-huh.
So what was the research around coming up with that? That's for average family childcare provider, that's a substantial amount of
Right.
gross income.
Yeah. To be honest, it was picking a number out of the air. And a plan is just a plan. That's the thing. Having been in business for my whole career, I know that you got to start somewhere and just pick a number. And at the end of the day, at the end of the first year, I'll figure out, well, what is a number that makes sense for family childcare based upon what kind of impact we can have. Especially, if it's a family childcare program that has 6 children and they're only going to have 6 children, I'm not going to be able to have that kind of impact on their bottom line. So, maybe it's $50 a month. I don't know. But having been in business for as many years as I have been, you don't have all the answers when you start something new like this. You just got to put something down on paper and start. And then revise, revise, revise. Yes.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that idea, I really do think kind of the benefit of a business plan is actually kind of communicating some of the value to building this argument, but the actual sort of benefit is not to the childcare center alone, but really the customer here or the client is the community, right? And it's a public good that we should be building a rationale to say, this needs to be funded by our states and by our federal government because it's bringing a real value to the entire sector
Right.
of the working community. And I think being able to still build ways for providers of all types to feel they've got ownership and engagement in the process is really key, but that also, it's a great way to demonstrate value, I think, to a much larger audience, so that not only is there financial benefit to a singular person, a provider, but that the benefits are really shared much more broadly. And so hopefully the financial
Right.
stability for that is also more broad.
Yeah, and coming from the private sector, a lot of people have asked me, and even when they, are talking to me about what I'm doing, there's like, how's your business going? And this, I very intentionally did not set this up as a for-profit business. It is a community service that I'm providing, and it took a long time. People are like, oh, don't set up a 501c3. It's like a huge headache. Well, it took a long time. It wasn't that big of a headache, actually. And but I got it in January, which allowed me to go then start doing some fundraising. But what I really want to do is to be able to collect data, to be able to shine a light on this industry, and to be able to go to the state with real data about the cost of care, and other community organizations about the real data, because I also believe that it shouldn't just be the government that is supporting us. All the businesses in our community need to understand that we need high quality childcare in order for all their employees to come to work every day. And to be able to have employees, high quality, workers 20 years from now. So that's my mission, is to kind of get the word out, but to kind of shine a light on what this industry really is and how difficult it is for people. Yes.
It makes me think, I'm sure everybody already knows this. So I just, but coming from a state that doesn't want to touch the wage issue, they're hesitant to get involved in that right now. So they distributed, like every other state, just gave you the money, figure it out. And our providers are actually using the word paralyzed. I'm paralyzed with this ARPA money. I don't know what to do.
Right.
Like, what if something happens? I'm not even operating at even. How can I raise wages? And I always thought, I don't even want my tax dollars going to a center that isn't collecting. They're operating using the iron triangle. So
Right.
There's that piece. But if we were to look at state funding investment in a really strategic way for a shared services model, in a really strategic way to get everybody, that being short term, addressing the wage issue and the recruitment issue and the economic failure or market failure of childcare,
Right.
while we're figuring out the wage issue, that's going to take another 20 years.
Right.
But I just like when we go to our budget people in the legislature, they're like, we don't want to give it as a wage, give it as a bonus. We're like, well, they're going to get taxed on it.
I know.
20% at least. So can we put it? How can we get it? We'll give it to the providers. They can give it as wage. Well, they're going to match their tax on that. They're going to pay their workers' comp on that money. There's like all these things going on, and I just was like, well, maybe if we got our act together. Well, New Hampshire can do it, so we're not doing anything anyway. So we're ahead of the game because we don't have to redo anything. But if
Yeah.
we started and said, let's really strengthen the shared services model so that it is the model. It's not just an offer. We're going to offer
Right.
this. We're going to offer this. We're going to offer the website. No, that's not what we need. We need this comprehensive kind of investment. So, anyway, sorry, that should.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I struggle myself because I truly believe in the free market. It just, coming from a business background. So there's never a part of me that's going to say, if you want to be in the childcare industry, you have to join this shared services alliance, But I want to make it easy for people to get into the childcare industries, to increase capacity and to have the time and energy to focus on quality. So, I want to start a movement so that people want to jump on with me and say, oh, I'm going to get into this industry because they've got it all figured out for me. And all I need to do is, go to some, well, it's never easy, right? Every day. And that's the other reason that I'm just so passionate about this industry, because I have so much respect for people that are running these programs and what their days are like. It's just exhausting just being in the center with them, just watching what's going on, much less having to be there all day, every day. And I start getting texts and emails from providers at 6 o'clock in the morning, just like, well, when I have my first cup of coffee, I'll respond to that one. So. Any other questions?
I know you said that all your centers are fairly small, but consistently the same size. Will they pay the same fees regardless? What's like the ones for 25 as opposed to?
I'm thinking of more of a sliding scale. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking about going forward. And even though sort of my strategy is to focus on those that are less than 100, in our pilot, we have some that are over 100. They're, women that I've been friends with in the industry for a couple of years, but I want access to their data. I want to be able to show if you have 140 children, even though you're in the worst neighborhood in Orlando, you can make money in this business, and she's been this provider that's in my network, she's been very successful. It's a challenging industry, and she's got all kinds of parent problems and child behavior problems and, theft problems and you name it, she's got it. But she is able to make money in the business. So I want to be able to show, here's what a program your size looks like. If you would, allow us to take over some of those administrative things for you or expand your program, you can do a lot better than you're doing. So. You had a question in the back?
Yeah, did you happen to mention how you're structured? Are you a 501c3 or are you under another organization?
So I'm an independent 501c3. Yeah.
And how did you decide that was how you wanted to be structured? And are you thinking that somewhere down the road that might evolve as the business strategy?
When I was, kind of originally putting the plan together, I thought, well, maybe I could become a program of I hadn't really not that much interest in creating my own 501c3, but I thought, well, maybe, the United Way will take this on as a project or some other community organization. And as I was vetting my business plan, nobody stepped up and said, oh yeah, we'd love to do that with you. And some of the organizations that I was trying to reach out to wouldn't even, kind of respond to my emails. So I just decided, what, I'm just going to keep plowing forward, doing this myself and seeing where this goes. And I'm a very faithful person. So a lot of this comes from lots and lots of prayer. And so this is just how it's evolved. So I just prayed and said, I'm just going to write the business plan. I'm going to start sending it around to people, seeing what kind of interest I get. I got a lot of yes, go do this. But then I thought, well, people said, don't, 501c3 is too hard. Well, you know what? I'm just going to fill out the application and see what happens. And crickets from the IRS for 6 months. I didn't hear anything. And I just thought maybe it's never going to happen. I don't know. And then I got a letter saying, we just want some more information, feel free to call us. So I'm like, oh, there's a number to call. I'm going to call this person. I got an actual person who's like, oh, your application was great. We love you. We just need a few more things and you're good to go. And so I'm just taking it a step at a time with lots of prayers along the way to see what happens. But one of the things that's actually happened, I was, and I've personally funded it until I got my 501c3, and then I was able to reach out to some foundations and personal friends to get some more funding. But we are now getting funding through the state's PDG funding for 2022, which to the tune of like $1.5 million, which is kind of beyond my wildest dreams. So I still feel like the prayer part is making a difference. So I don't know where it's going to land. I personally don't want to run this for the next 20 years. I mean, my thought is to build something for the next 5 years, put an organization into place, and then be kind of part of the advisory board at that point. And that's another reason why I wanted it to be a nonprofit. This isn't, I'm not building something to sell. I'm not building anything to make money. I'm just building it as a community service that will live on after I'm not, directly involved every day. All right. Well, I'll be around if anybody has any more questions. I have my card is here, and yeah, you'll find the actual business plan on the. It's like more genericized than the one I built, so you'll not see the word Elsa in there anywhere. But feel free to take it and use as much of it as you want to.
Thank you.
You're welcome.